Hi, thanks for being here. My name is Julie, and I have multiple chronic illnesses. This YouTube channel is all about living with chronic illnesses and what that's really like. I started this channel in 2020 after publishing the book, The Things We Don't Say, an anthology of chronic illness truths, which is right here. This is a nonfiction anthology, so it's a collection of different works. In this case, it's 50 nonfiction pieces by 42 different contributing authors from all over the world. And I wanted to get a variety of experiences. So those authors are different ages, ethnicities, races, sexual orientations, gender identities, and they write about living with physical chronic illnesses and mental chronic illnesses. You can find out more at chronicillnesstruths.com. And I will put URLs in the description below so that you can learn more. So today I am talking with one of the contributing authors from the book so that you can learn a little bit more about her and what she wrote about, as well as her experience living with chronic illnesses. So today we are here with Wendy Kennar, who wrote the piece Chronic Contradictions. Wendy's piece is in the second section of the book entitled Experiencing the Emotions, which, let's face it, could apply to so many of the pieces, but I did try to separate them out a little bit. Each piece in the book gives the author's name as well as where they're from and a short bio. So I'm going to read that bio now as I introduce you to Wendy, who is coming to us from Los Angeles in California. So her bio says, Wendy Kennar is a mother, freelance writer, and former teacher. Her writing is largely inspired by her 9-year-old son and from the experiences of her 12-year teaching career. Wendy's personal essays have appeared in a number of publications, both in print and online. You can read more from Wendy at www.wendykennar.com. And again, I will put that URL in the description below so that you can find it easily enough. So Wendy, thank you for being here.
Hi, Julie. Thank you for having me. This is like a great honor. Thank you.
Oh, well, I'm just so glad that you're here. So to start us off, please tell us a little bit, what are your chronic illnesses, your diagnoses and/or symptoms?
My official diagnosis is undifferentiated connective tissue disease. So UCTD are the letters. I kind of call it like an alphabet soup. I've found over the years, it's kind of a fancy way of saying doctors aren't entirely sure what you have. So when I was diagnosed, it took about a year and a half to be diagnosed, which I understand isn't really that long, even though it felt like it was 10 years, but it was about a year and a half. My rheumatologist described it as sharing overlapping symptoms of lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and myositis, but it wasn't any of those. But it took a little bit of each, but it wasn't any of those. And at the time, you're just so happy to have a name, a label to stick on this thing that doctors haven't been able to figure out. And at least in my case, we went through multiple different specialists and all sorts of tests and a muscle biopsy, and the fear of, is it cancer? Is it leukemia? Is it MS? So then you hear something like this, and the doctor tells me it's autoimmune. And my first question is, because I had a little one at the time, I'm like, is it fatal? No, no, no. I'm like, okay, all good, all good. And then the longer you live with it, the more you realize it's not all good. It's really, really hard. And it doesn't necessarily get any easier the longer you have it. For me, my symptoms are pain and fatigue and weakness in my leg, but mostly my left leg. And so I'm told that's very rare, that it's not affecting both and just the one, which made it harder, I guess, to diagnose. And for many years, it was all below the knee. And the last few years, it's now below the knee and above the knee. So it's kind of spreading in a sense. So I've kind of started back in that cycle of having to see some new doctors, having to go through some more tests, another muscle biopsy. And we're trying to figure out if it's still UCTD or if it's kind of morphed into something else. So you've actually caught me in the midst of all that. And I have a follow-up email happening later this week. So that is that so far.
Yeah. How long have you been living with your symptoms?
Since 2010. So,
Okay. And for those who might be watching this later, it's currently March of 2021. So that's about 11 years.
yeah.
So something you mentioned I thought was, I don't have the word. I was going to say interesting. It's not. It's sad. You mentioned it took a year and a half to get diagnosed, and it's not that long. Oh my gosh, a year and a half is such a long time. The problem is it's so far below the average that people go, oh, it only took you a year and a half. How lucky for you,
Mhm.
which is not the right answer, because when you're spending a year and a half in pain or fatigued or nauseated or whatever your symptoms are, that's a really long time. And especially if you have a little child, you can measure it in terms of their short lifespan to that point. And it feels so long. It took me 11 years to get the UCT diagnosis, which is just even more unacceptable. But it doesn't make your year and a half better. You know,
I
it's just
know.
different degrees of horrible, I think. But that's just my opinion.
No, it's a really good way of putting it because it depends who you speak with. When you speak to someone who has no experience with chronic illness, they hear a year and a half and it's like, oh my gosh, that's awful. Then I speak to you or other people I know, and it's like, year and a half isn't that bad. It could have been worse. And yes, it could have, but you're doing that, or at least I was doing that in the midst of teaching full time. My son was 2 when I got sick. He had turned 3 by the time I was diagnosed. So got a little boy in the house. It was trying to coordinate all that, making phone calls for doctors during my students' recess and lunches and trying to coordinate it with after school. I mean, it was a very, very scary time because your head just automatically goes to bad. If doctors can't easily identify it, if doctors can't easily tell you what it is, then or at least my head automatically goes to it's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that I found interesting was your response was, oh, it's not fatal. Okay, it's all good.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, because it'd taken me so long, my feeling was, this is permanent. I'm going to have this forever. I'd accepted that. And then I got the diagnosis. And yet I went through the stages of grief all over again because now it was confirmed. Whereas I'd had the tiniest sliver of hope that maybe it was curable. So I find that really interesting too, because like you, no one could explain what an undifferentiated connective tissue disease really was.
I think I wasn't really aware of how life changing autoimmune chronic illness is. I have asthma and I have since I'm a kid. But for me, it's very much like I carry my inhaler with me. And thankfully, knock on wood, I haven't had to use it for a while. And it's just kind of there in the background. So in my head, it was like, UCTD is going to be along those lines. It's something I'll have to keep an eye on. There might be some things I can or can't do as easily, but kind of no big deal. And it didn't take me too long to realize, well, that was way wrong. And it is a big deal. And it is going to just, I told one friend at a time it was like an octopus and it affected this area of my life and then this one and then this one and then this one. And it just kind of snowballs. You can't neatly contain it and keep going on and on. This chronic illness, this uncurable thing, it really does kind of take on a life of its own and impact every area of your life as you knew it.
That octopus image is very strong. Like I just saw it, like, oh wow, yes, I can imagine those tentacles reaching out and it does impact all these different areas. It's a
Yeah.
really good, that's a really good image. I mean, it's not good image, but it's a powerful one. It's a good example. Um, so what are some of the ways that you feel have been, what maybe some parts of your life that have been the most impacted that you maybe wouldn't have expected or that someone else might be surprised to hear about?
For me, the biggest thing was I had to give up teaching. I had been a public school teacher and I was teaching elementary school and I was teaching fourth grade at the time. And I'm a very hands on, moving around the room all the time, lots of, trying to find new ways of doing things. So when we're learning equivalent fractions, it's not just on the board, but it's me bringing tortillas into the classroom and us cutting them with little forks and learning that, one whole tortilla is the same as two halves, which is the same as 4/4, and you just keep going because my kids could see it and then eat it afterwards. But this is like the kind of teacher I was, and I didn't have the energy for it. We used to do a lot of walking field trips because our school was located in an area where that was possible. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't walk them. And little by little, I was noticing there was just more things that it was harder for me to get through the day. I had to start taking the school elevator. My classroom was upstairs. So I would take the elevator when I wasn't with my students. So before school or during lunchtime or something. And then I got stuck in the elevator one morning. And so there was that whole thing. And it was just, I felt like I was going to school, and those are my kids. Like, they weren't my students, they were my kids. And it was very much, Mrs. Kennar loves you, good morning loves, and blowing kisses. And that was a huge part of my identity. So more and more I was seeing I was going to school and giving like 80% of myself. And then I'd come home late afternoon and a little bit left for my son. And then there was like nothing left for my husband and for myself. And I just felt like I couldn't keep it up. And my rheumatologist for a while was asking, are you still working? And it was in the beginning, felt like like a crazy question. Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't I be? And the longer this went on, it was more like, uh-huh, I'm trying. And then it was like, are you going to look into? And it took me a while because I didn't think I was sick enough. I didn't think I would qualify, because some people didn't know I was dealing with anything. I didn't go around broadcasting it. And I kept some of it very quiet and private. And I didn't want to be looked at differently or judged differently. And I just didn't think it took me a while. I'm embarrassed to admit, but it took me a while to realize that, disability doesn't look all the same. My grandma, she was a woman who was not healthy, and she was in a wheelchair, and on a good day she could use a cane, and she had rheumatoid arthritis and had suffered strokes and breast cancer. In my head, she was disabled. Disability didn't look like my package, and it took me a while to learn disability is this range, and it doesn't look the same for everyone. And it might not even look the same for me today as it does tomorrow or later today. And so it really took me a long time to admit that I couldn't keep teaching the way I wanted to teach and then be the person I wanted to be for my family. So that was something that I really hadn't expected would happen. And it's still, I just had my 8-year anniversary of my last day of teaching. It's like one of those days like on the calendar that is still, it's emotional for me. It hasn't gotten any easier.
Yeah. I think that up until this year, probably most people couldn't have understood that. But right now we're in March of 2021, and the last 2 months have been a series of people saying, oh, it was a year ago that this happened with the pandemic. It was a year ago that this other thing happened. We're coming up on the anniversary of lockdown or whatever the thing might be. And I think more people are maybe understanding that because the anniversary of my diagnosis, that's in my calendar too. And
Yeah.
I am very aware of that day every year. Actually, it's in March. It's coming up in 2 weeks. And I'm very aware of it. And I think that can be a hard thing to explain to people. And the date I had to stop working also, I can absolutely relate to that. And, you're touching on something that you brought up a lot in the book, which is the invisibility or the supposed invisibility of your chronic illness, because I think that there are a lot of things that are called invisible that really aren't if you know what to look for, if someone's paying attention. Where someone close to us might see, wait a minute, you just winced, or you're not acting like yourself, or I can see it in your eyes.
Mhm.
But a lot of people won't pick up on it. And you definitely talked about that aspect. And I'm curious, what made you choose that topic to write about? I mean, let's face it, there's an unending number of things you can write about chronic illness. So what was it about that that pulled you in that direction?
There were a couple of things. I think it was the word chronic. You know, it has a very negative connotation. Something that's chronic usually isn't that good. But when you think about what the word really means, it's something that's long lasting. It's something that's going to be around a while. Those are generally good things. And so it was that contradiction that I started to play with. And for me, it was the feeling of I've never, and maybe I won't ever get there, like gotten to a place of complete acceptance with this and been like, okay, I'm okay with this. No, I'm not okay with this. There are some days it's really hard. There are some days where I really want to take a baseball bat and just break something. And I don't do those things normally. And there are some days where I'm like, it's hard, it's bad, but I can do this. And I think I also thought it would get easier over time. I would reach a level of acceptance and maybe even gratitude for this because it could have been so much worse. We could have heard something different than UCTD, but that doesn't discount UCTD. And I think those are conflicting things. Those are contradictions that we're always kind of trying to figure out how to live with, that it's hard. Maybe someone else has something else and that's hard for them. And I don't have to compare my hard to their hard. And that's really difficult to do. There's that old saying, you don't compare. I forget exactly how it goes, but something about, you might complain your shoes are too tight, but then the other person has no shoes at all or something like that. So, who am I to complain that my leg hurts? Someone else could have no leg. And I have to, even now, continuously remind myself I don't need to compare my pain to someone else's pain. My pain is my pain, and it's valid, and it's okay to say that and to accept it and to have moments or days where I'm like, this stinks. This is so unfair. Why me? And then to have other days where it's like, what makes you so special, Wendy? Why not you? Why should you be exempt? And those are all things I feel like I'm always working on.
Okay, everyone watching, rewind, listen to that part again, because that was very wise right there, what Wendy said, and I think we all need to hear it. I know it's something I struggle with. I have friends saying things all the time to me, oh, I don't want to complain about my situation because it's not as bad as yours. And I have to say, no, yours is totally valid. Tell me what's going on with you. And
Uh,
yet I will often feel like maybe I shouldn't complain about something because it's not as bad as someone else's. And I have to remind myself, I have to say to myself the same things I tell other people, which is there is no one person in the world who has it worse than anybody else and is the only one who's allowed to complain. That person doesn't exist.
exactly.
Everybody, no matter how bad their situation, can probably point to someone else who's got it worse. And that doesn't invalidate their situation. So if we can say that about others, shouldn't we be able to say that about ourselves too? So I'm always trying to remind myself of that also.
But it always feels so much easier to share the wisdom with someone else and put it out there for someone else. And it's so much harder to take it in and to practice it and follow it. It's something I'm always working on.
Me too. And I think for me also, because I so often see the the thing with autoimmune disease, for anyone who doesn't know, is that in my oh so scientific way, I'll say when your body is out of whack, it's easier for more things within your body to get out of whack. And so it's very common to have more than one autoimmune disease, which I have. But I can look at all the others out there and know I could develop any one of them, especially in certain categories, I'm more likely. And I'm so grateful I haven't. So on the one hand, being grateful I don't have something, and yet at the same time, allowing myself to feel the way I feel about what I do have. And so it's a tricky thing, especially because there aren't a lot of great resources out there about how to navigate this. And it's not something people talk about. We live in this society, right, where you're either sick or you're healthy. And if you're sick, then you get healthy. That's it. And there it hasn't really been an in between that gets talked about very much. And we are in that in between, that always sick.
And I feel it, I see it more and more with my son. And when he's throughout the years, when he's doing health education and he reads the chapters about water and fruits and veggies and get enough sleep and exercise your body and taking care of your feelings. And, each year gets a little more advanced and a little more, but it's very much, like you do these things, A, B, you will stay healthy. And he sees it firsthand. It doesn't always work that way. It's not always a clear, direct path of who becomes ill to any extent and who doesn't. And it's not anything you did. That was my other question after I was diagnosed, was what did I do wrong? What should I have done differently? Did I pass this on to my son? Your head goes and you immediately want to blame yourself, like this is a punishment. I did something wrong. And that took a while too, to realize, no, Wendy, you didn't do anything wrong. It just happened. It stinks and it happened.
Bad luck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
unfortunately. Okay, I'm going to take a second to say, if you are enjoying this video, please hit the like button and hit the subscribe button below, because then you will learn about more excellent videos. And now we will return. I just needed to take a moment to say that. So, okay. You have done a bunch of other writing about life with chronic illness. Would you like to share anything about your other writing or your other involvement in the chronic illness community or anything like that?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I've always enjoyed writing, and in the very beginning, I would tend to write about experiences I had from teaching, things that happened in the classroom, and I was very private about my chronic illness struggles. And when I stopped teaching, it was almost like I need a thing. I need what else is going to help define me in addition to mother, wife, daughter. I needed a thing that's mine. And so more and more it was writing. And so more and more I've been able to write and publish different pieces, different aspects of parenting with an invisible disability, trying to still date my husband with an invisible disability. What it's like to walk around always feeling guilty that I have a chronic illness. And so, one of the places that I found just like this great resource for anyone who's watching is themighty.com. And they have pieces on a wide variety of illnesses, physical and mental. And I believe they're just now starting a podcast as well. And it's a very welcoming, inclusive environment where it really feels like you find a community where there will be someone else out there. Yes, thank you. And it really means so much to me when I write a piece and someone comments, I needed this today, or thank you, or this is what I've been feeling, but didn't know how to put into words. And I think that's the great power of your anthology, is that because I'm a reader, after I got diagnosed, you go looking and there is nothing about UCTD. And then you go a little broader and you can't, there are books on certain illnesses and certain diseases, but nothing that really felt like it fit for me and what I was navigating. And I think when I read the anthology, I was really surprised by how many pieces, the emotions were so much what I felt, even though the physical stuff was so vastly different. But the emotional aspect of it was oh so true, even though what the author was dealing with physically, I had no experience with, but that emotional component, it's so universal. And there were multiple pieces in here. And when I would read like the bio, or I'd read a description of what the author dealt with, I'm like, my goodness, I thought you would have exactly what I have, because the way they described it and their emotional experience. And so it's been a way for me to connect through my writing, and a way for me to still teach in a way through my writing. And so I write, I submit to the Mighty. I write a weekly blog, and I write about books, and I write about boys, primarily parenting my son, and I write about bodies, living with an invisible disability. And the newest way I've been connecting with the chronic illness community is through a support group. And because of the wonders of Zoom, there are 4 members of us now, and one is on a completely different continent. And the other three of us are in the United States, but I'm the only one on the West Coast. But somehow through Zoom, it works. It happens, and we get together every other week, and we're able to talk. And every participant is dealing again with a different physical ailment, but there's still so much of that emotional that's so very much overlapping and that we can connect with. And there's just something so wonderful when you can find someone and they get it. Because as much as I love my husband, as much as I love my family, they can't quite get it. And I don't want them to, because the only way you can get it is if you have a chronic illness. And so when you can find another person out there who gets it, it's like such a relief, this big huge sigh. It's like, yes, you understand. That's it exactly. And that's another beautiful aspect of your book, is that it just, all these people feel that connection to each other.
I agree with you. The wonders of Zoom are pretty miraculous. And I love that you found that group, because for me, I found a group locally, which took way too many years. I'd been looking for a long time, but it was that same issue where nothing applied, like with the books. And that is what led me to this topic where, yes, you could find a book on a condition, but not this more universal experience. And even if there was a book about a condition I had, which there wasn't always, it wouldn't apply necessarily. Because if people are talking about celiac disease and they only have celiac disease, then they're maybe not dealing with some of these other issues that I'm dealing with on top of the celiac, and it's not the same experience. And what I found so interesting in my support group and in this book were all of, like you said, the experiences that were so different and yet so similar. Um, Something that I found really astonishing is that I would be editing the book. And so I wasn't necessarily paying attention to where in the book I was just reading and editing. And even though I'd read every piece a million times, I'd read a page and go, oh, this must be from my piece. And I'd keep going and realize, no, this was someone else's.
Oh,
And I couldn't
wow.
even remember which I had written, because it was something I could have written.
Yeah.
Right. And because it was probably something I had written about at some point. I've been blogging also for many years, but anonymously. So my anonymous blog has been going for about 10 years.
Oh,
So I've
wow.
covered a lot in those 10 years, and I guess I forget. But it's amazing to me how it's not only people who have maybe the same kinds of autoimmune diseases, but non-autoimmune chronic illnesses or mental health conditions. And yet so many of our experiences overlap. And I think there's so much value in talking to each other about that kind of thing. And it
And I,
makes, oh,
sorry.
please go ahead. No, you go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say, it goes back to something I heard about in a writing class I took, because one of the benefits of not teaching is I could be a student and take a class that happens during the day. But that in writing the specific, it touches on the universal. And you don't tend to think that at first. You think you're going to be too specific and no one's going to care. And it's just my story. And what's the big deal? But that's what I'm finding, is that even though it starts with the specific of me and my leg, and it feels like this, and I feel like that, it kind of branches out, and it's got this universal message and a universal way of connecting with other people. And I just think, especially now when we feel kind of disjointed in a sense, it's so valuable to feel connected to other people.
Absolutely. I completely agree. That connection is huge. And I know for me, when in my blog, where some of the pieces I thought about not writing because no one talks about this, and they were the ones that got the most response because no one talks about these things, but they're still so important to talk about. And for me, writing anonymously allowed me to feel more open in that kind of writing. So whenever people feel sort of unsure about opening up like that, I always suggest start off anonymous. You can always change it down the road. And that was actually what I was going to ask you next, was you write under your name. And I'm wondering if you have had a lot of friends or family reach out to you and say, oh, I actually have a chronic illness. Has that happened at all?
That's a good question. It hasn't happened in that way. I've had a couple of former students over the years find something I wrote and connect with me that way and just kind of check in. And that's been amazing to hear from someone that because for a while I taught kindergarten. So to hear from like a former kindergarten student who was then in college, it's like, oh, you're still not 5. Um, but and but it has been interesting. I had a neighbor that lived next door for several years, and she and her husband, super, super nice and everything, very friendly to our family. But there was always just, hi, how you doing, kind of pleasantries. But she started following my blog after she moved away. And we've had a couple of exchanges where she says that she feels like she knows me so much better now. And she feels closer to me now. And I think in a way, there's a part of me that even though I'm doing this, and even though I taught in front of a classroom for 12 years, can be very shy and doesn't want the spotlight on me. And if the spotlight's going to be on me, it has to be for a reason, like to help spread knowledge about chronic illness. And so it's easier for me to share those bits of myself through writing rather than me up on a stage having to talk about it or just bring it up in conversation with my next door neighbor. But I am working on a memoir and essays, and there's the part of me that thinks, this is a book that needs to get out there. And then there's the other part of me that's like, oh my God, this will be a book that will get out there. So
I can relate to that. I can totally relate to that. And I've been speaking about chronic illness just on social media and to family and friends and out in the world for a long time. But there is definitely something about putting a book out there, and especially all of the promotion that goes along with it. It definitely puts it out there more, and more people became aware of it, which can be good too, right? I had someone come up to me at my high school reunion who said he'd been reading my posts, and I didn't know he was even following me on Facebook. He'd been reading my posts, and they helped him to better understand a coworker who has multiple sclerosis. And I thought that was amazing because I don't have MS. I wasn't talking about MS, but again, so many things overlap and relate. And so it makes me feel better that, okay, I'm opening myself up, but like you said, it is definitely helping people out there in the world. And then they, like you said, also understand what we're going through better when we talk about it.
exactly. Yeah. I've learned that kind of the hard way, that my husband or my son won't know exactly how bad it is if I don't tell them. They're as great as they are, they're not mind readers. And yes, they can sometimes tell. I do a thing with my lips sometimes if I'm upset, and I might bite my lip, or I might start to clench my fists or something. And they can pick up on certain cues, but they won't always know how bad it is unless I speak it. And it's really hard to do sometimes.
It must have been interesting for your family to read your piece in the book. I'm assuming they read your piece in the book.
Yes.
Did they read other pieces in the book?
I hope so. I'm not 100% sure. I was hoping that it would be a way to kind of start the conversation a little more. And I have a friend who has fibromyalgia, and she read the book, and she and I had these great conversations even before, but then the book gave us a new way of kind of talking about it. And this is with someone who has her own chronic illness and has her own chronic pain. And we already have that connection, but there was something about other people kind of doing the hard work for you of trying to put it down first that just kind of makes it easier sometimes to start to have some of those conversations.
Yeah, well, I think too, sometimes we don't realize how universal an aspect of the experience is until we realize that others are having it as well, right? And so we assume, well, this is just me. And then 5 other people talk about it, and you go, oh, maybe it's not just me. What do you know? I was definitely hoping that this book would be something where, a person might go to a loved one and say, hey, read this piece over here. This is what I've been trying to say, or haven't known that I needed to say, because a lot of times I think we get so used to something that we forget, oh, this is worth mentioning. This is something I should bring up. And I definitely have that reading any book, not just this one, but any book, sometimes even fiction. And I'll just go, oh my gosh, yes, this is the thing I've been thinking about. And
Exactly.
it's so great to have someone else bring it up and put words to this nebulous concept.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do want to wrap up in the next few minutes because I know personally I don't always have the capacity for longer videos and podcasts and all of that. But I'm wondering, what else is it that you'd like people to know about you or your writing, your chronic illness situation, or really anything?
Um,
And I just threw a really broad question at you, and I'm sorry for that.
I know. I guess one thing I'd like people to know is that I don't have all the answers. I don't have this figured out really. And I feel like I'm always learning, and I was thinking, because I pick up the book from time to time and I reread different pieces, and sometimes I'm looking for something specific, and sometimes I just randomly, let's see what I find today. And, for a long time, I'm embarrassed to admit I was that person that might see someone park in a disabled parking spot and look at the driver and never say anything, but in my head, have that internal conversation of, what are you doing parking there? You don't need it. And I cringe now, like admitting that out loud. And so I guess, I'm hoping that people come away thinking you really can't judge someone by what you see or how they seem to be acting. Or, I had someone tell me once, you really can't be in that much pain. Look, your jewelry matches. I'm
Wow.
not quite sure what the correlation was with that. And it actually like sparked this piece that I wrote that's on the Mighty about, yes, I can feel awful, but I can wear jewelry for other reasons. One doesn't negate the other. But people are very quick to try and want to put you in a box or make a judgment based on how you look. And the longer I'm dealing with this, the more I've come to realize everyone's hurting in some way. Maybe it's not their leg like I have. And, maybe you won't see it on the outside. I'm not walking with a cane. So you might not know that my leg hurts. I might just look like a woman who walks slowly. But, I've had people honk at me when I'm crossing, or I've had people kind of hurry up, and maybe we need to try and press pause on those impulses and think, you don't know what's going on. You can't see, you don't really know. And so I think that's something I'd like people to know, is that I'm still learning these things, and I'm hopeful that my son is growing up knowing, I mean, he's going to be 13 soon, and he's growing up knowing that, everybody's kind of dealing with something, and it's not always a very nice, neat cause and effect. You smoked a lot, therefore you have this. It doesn't always work that way. And like you said, sometimes it's just random bad luck. But yet I'm hoping that he's learning up to be a little more patient and a little more understanding and give people the benefit of the doubt. Yes, I'm walking slowly, but there might be a reason. It's not just to hold you up in traffic or something like that. And those are lessons I've had to learn for myself, and just to give myself permission. For a long time, I didn't apply for the disabled parking placard. Even after I had to retire from teaching because of a disability, I still didn't want that very visible blue placard hanging from my rearview mirror and calling attention to myself. And that went on for several years because I thought, surely someone else needs it more than me. And surely I'm not deserving of it. And on and on and on. And it's gotten to the point where I can have it in the glove compartment. I can choose what days I use it and where I use it. And I don't have to use it all the time, but it's there when I need it, if I have to use it. And yes, I am deserving, even if I don't look like what someone else thinks looks like a disabled driver. And those are lessons that, just because we have chronic illnesses doesn't mean it was an automatic and we just automatically knew these things. I feel like I'm always still learning how to navigate all this.
Yeah, I think that it's very brave of you actually to admit that you used to be judgmental of people who did not have obvious visible disabilities parking in disabled parking spaces, because I think that so many people feel shame for having made those kinds of errors and allow that shame to stop them from trying to get better in those areas. And I think we've all made these mistakes, right? I know I have, and I still catch myself using ableist terminology or something along those lines. And I think it's okay as long as we admit the mistake,
Mhm.
apologize if necessary, and then work to make it better. So I love that you admit that, yes, this was a mistake you made, and now you know better, because chances are a lot of us made the mistakes before we knew better in this area or other areas. So I think that's really important. And I struggled to get my disabled parking card for different reasons, but I also struggled. For me, it was I wasn't ready to admit to myself I was really disabled, because I'd had chronic pain for, probably about 12 years at that point, and hadn't felt the need for it before. Partly because of where my pain was, like upper body versus lower body, and partly having to do with when it started. I was a child and driving wasn't really a thing. So there were a lot of reasons for that. But I did finally have to accept that. And I think that we all struggle with admitting, yes, we need and deserve and should have access to these services because they're there for us. So yes, let's remember those services are there for us to use when we need them. I don't always use the card, but I have it when I need it. And it does make a huge difference. And the day I decided to get it was the day I injured myself rushing back to feed a parking meter, because I was trying to walk too fast on a knee that was really not having a day where I could walk fast or really at all. And it shouldn't have taken that. I should have been willing before that, but I wasn't. And I think that we all have our different timelines, but I'd like to see less guilt and shame being part of the equation, ideally.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I think that it's probably about time to wrap up. So I will encourage everyone to go check out Wendy's website at wendykennar.com, which will be in the description below. And thank you so much, Wendy, for joining today. This was really a fabulous conversation, and I could just talk to you about this all day long.
Well, Julie, thank you so much. I mean, honestly, like all these years, I've never met anyone who even knows what UCTD is. So that to actually come into contact with someone who has not just knows it, but has it, it's like, I'm not the only one. So, and so to get a chance just to chat with you, this has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And I will say the same thing. I got the diagnosis, and then it took, how many years? What year is it now? It took about 18 years to find someone else who had this similar diagnosis. So yeah, thank you as well. If you have enjoyed this video, again, please click like below. Please subscribe to the channel. I am going to be doing more interviews with the contributing authors from the book. So I hope that all of you will come join, and you'll learn more about life with chronic illness and what went into each of the pieces. And I will put information below as well about the book, The Things We Don't Say, an anthology of chronic illness truths, so that you can check it out if you're interested. So, oh, look at that. Wendy has it too. So have a great day, everyone, and I hope that you all are feeling as well as possible. Bye.
Bye.